When the sheriff's deputy entered the McDonald home, the very first thing he noticed was blood on the bathroom light switch. Inside, there were also visible traces of blood on the floor and along the door frame. The bedroom looked like it had been recently and carefully cleaned, but the evidence hadn't been fully erased. Behind the house, on a pathway, there was ash left from a fire pit, and among the remains, investigators found a fragment that looked like a zipper. In the garage, there was a Chevrolet Malibu with a dent near the trunk, and the tires were covered in light-colored gravel. While the home was being searched, Andre McDonald returned. He claimed he had been at the hospital checking on his wife, but a call to the hospital quickly proved that wasn't true. After that, he admitted there had been an argument, but said he didn't know where she was. He was detained on the spot. Later testing confirmed that the blood found inside the house belonged to Andreen McDonald, but that was only the beginning. Just a few hours after being released, Andre began moving around the city. Surveillance cameras captured him at Lowe's, where he picked up a shovel, an axe, gloves, and fuel cans. After that, he went to a Shell gas station and then later to a gun store. Inside the shop, he purchased a Smith & Wesson pistol along with ammunition, leaving his ID right on the counter. By that point, police were already waiting outside. They moved in immediately after him, right as he stepped out of the store and... Hey guys, let me grab you for just a second. I'm really curious where my audience is watching from, so I'd love for you to drop a comment and tell me what city you're in and what time it is for you right now. Thanks for taking a moment. Go ahead and share that in the comments. And now let's keep going. From the moment 29-year-old Andreen McDonald went missing, there was almost no doubt about who might be involved. In the immediate aftermath of her disappearance, her husband, Andre, misled law enforcement and claimed he had no idea where she was. After that, he stopped speaking altogether. Meanwhile, as the investigation and search for his wife continued, Andre was actively taking steps to cover his tracks. Then, years later, when he finally began to share his version of events, he presented a story no one saw coming. Andre McDonald and Andreen Anderson first met in 2009 in Port Antonio, Jamaica. Both of them were born and raised in Jamaica. After finishing school, Andre moved to Florida to live with his mother and enrolled in community college. He later earned a degree in electrical engineering from Florida International University. After graduating, Andre went through officer training as part of his service in the United States military. Eventually, Andreen, who was 10 years younger than him, moved to the United States to be with Andre, and soon after, they got married. Following the wedding, Andre, who was stationed in Florida at the time, was transferred to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. The early years of their marriage were, by all accounts, very happy. Andreen earned her degree from the University of Texas at San Antonio and gave birth to their daughter, Elena. The couple also launched a home care business, opening several assisted living facilities with full-time residents. In 2015, they were able to bring Andreen's mother, Hin Marine Smith, from Jamaica to the United States. She lived with them, helped care for Elena, and also worked in one of their facilities. At that time, the extended family appeared very close. By 2019, their daughter Elena was 6 years old. Both parents were busy. In 2016, Andre was promoted to major in the United States Air Force, but transferred to the reserves in order to stay in San Antonio. Andreen managed the day-to-day operations of their business, which was bringing in millions of dollars, and they were planning further expansion. On the morning of March 1st, 2019, Andreen did not show up for work and was not answering her phone. Carol, a close friend of Andreen's, became especially concerned. Carol was also a competitor in the assisted living industry, but despite that, the two had become very close and often worked together every morning. Worried, Carol, along with two of Andre's colleagues, went to the McDonald family home in northern Bexar County. Finding no one inside, Carol decided to look around the property. She quickly noticed signs that something was wrong. Behind the house, she saw ash along the pathway. A small fire had likely been burned there, and among the remains was a fragment that looked like a zipper. Carol then remembered something her friend had once said. "If I ever go missing, it will be because Andre killed me." Carol entered the house through an open back door, and inside her fears were confirmed. She saw a blood stain on the bathroom light switch. She took a photo of it on her phone and then contacted a detective friend who advised her to reach out to Andre's mother and the sheriff's office. Hin, who also went by her middle name Moren, met Carol at the house. She confirmed that no one had seen or heard from Andreen since the previous evening. The young woman's phone, keys, and purse were still inside the home, and both of her usual vehicles were parked in the driveway. Andre was not there. The Bexar County Sheriff's Office received a call from Carol and Moren and responded to the scene. During the search of the house, the deputy noticed several disturbing details. In the master bedroom, the carpet appeared to have been recently and thoroughly cleaned. He also observed blood on the bathroom light switch, the same spot Carol had photographed earlier, as well as blood on the bathroom floor and a small amount along the inside door frame. In the garage, there was a Chevrolet Malibu with a small dent on the rear near the trunk lid, and the tires were covered in light-colored gravel as if the car had recently been driven on a dirt road. While the investigation was underway, Andre McDonald returned to the home. He claimed he had just been at Baptist Emergency Hospital checking whether his wife was there and said everything was fine. However, a phone call to the hospital quickly disproved that statement. Confronted with this, Andre admitted that he and his wife had argued the night before, but said he did not know where she was. Law enforcement immediately detained him. He requested a lawyer and said nothing further. Meanwhile, blood samples from the switch and bathroom were sent for testing, and the results confirmed a match to Andreen McDonald. It also emerged that Andre had indeed been at Baptist Emergency Hospital shortly before returning home and encountering the sheriff's deputies. A receptionist, Brendan Gordon, stated that Andre entered the emergency department quickly and said he was looking for his wife. When asked for her last name, he said McDonald. After being told that a patient with that surname was being treated there, Andre silently looked around, turned, and left. It was later confirmed that the patient in the hospital was not Andreen. Andre McDonald was released from the Bexar County Sheriff's Office the following morning, March 2nd. For the next 12 hours, his whereabouts were unknown, and only later was his movement reconstructed. It was discovered that Andre had been running various errands. Surveillance cameras at Lowe's home improvement store showed him filling a cart with items that could be used for gardening or possibly camping, including a shovel, an axe, and gloves. He also purchased 2 5-gallon fuel containers. Andre paid in 2 transactions, one by card and the other in cash. He was later seen at a Shell gas station where he pulled up to the far right pump number 20, an area out of camera view. There he bought about 9.7 gallons of fuel and filled the 2 containers he had purchased at Lowe's. A sheriff's deputy monitoring the McDonald home after Andre's release later arrived to find that the garage door had been knocked off its tracks. He then observed Andre leaving the residence and began following him covertly. Andre was tracked to Nagel's gun shop. Inside the store, he purchased a firearm and a large quantity of ammunition, selecting a Smith & Wesson pistol and completing the payment, but then suddenly turned around and walked out, leaving the weapon, the ammunition, and his ID behind in the store. Police officers who were watching outside detained Andre as soon as he stepped out. At that point, they only had fragments of the full picture, but the situation already looked deeply concerning, and they began to worry about his mental state. During the incident, they also noticed cuts and other marks on his hands, and he gave inconsistent explanations for those injuries. He kept saying, "I love my daughter. I love her." Returning to the home on Solitude Cove, deputies made a disturbing observation. In the rear of a Porsche Macan registered to Andreen, there was a shovel inside the vehicle. During the initial sweep for safety checks, that item had not been there. Based on this, the sheriff's team initiated a second search and obtained a warrant. By the time investigators re-entered the residence, Andre had not been under observation for roughly 12 hours, from the moment he left the station until his later stop at the gun store. Members of the BCSO crime scene unit entered the home and, in addition to the shovel, discovered multiple items, mostly inside two vehicles that Andre had used over the previous 2 days. In the back seat of the Malibu, there was an axe on the floor. In the trunk, investigators found a roll of black plastic. Inside the cabin were 2 lighters. In the Porsche, they located a box of heavy-duty trash bags, a full-size axe, a smaller hatchet, and a pair of work gloves. Inside a white plastic bag, they also found a worn hammer with plant debris on it, and there were traces of blood on the hammer as well. In a trash receptacle, investigators recovered 2 torn receipts, linking most of these items to purchases made at a Lowe's home improvement store. It appeared that the items had not been used immediately after purchase, but had instead been gathered together as if prepared for transport. The hammer, however, was dirty and blood-stained. Testing confirmed that the blood on it belonged to Andreen McDonald. Inside the residence, there was not enough evidence to fully reconstruct the exact sequence of events, but the BCSO concluded that the husband was directly involved in what had happened to his wife. The day after the missing person report was filed, Andre was formally arrested and charged with tampering with evidence.
It led us to believe that these were implements that were going to be used to dispose of a body, quite obviously to us, which really tends to drive home the point to us that we believe that Andreen McDonald is no longer living.
In the days that followed, a large-scale search operation was launched. Local volunteers, military personnel, the FBI, and law enforcement agencies systematically combed through areas across Bexar County. Data from Andre's phone turned out to be of little use. Investigators believe that if he had disposed of his wife's body, he likely left the phone at home to avoid leaving a trace. Search teams on horseback, ATVs, and on foot covered the rough terrain around San Antonio. Every area that was checked meant one more zone could be ruled out, and although the progress was slow, it continued steadily. During the ongoing daily search efforts, Andre McDonald was released on bail due to insufficient evidence and placed under house arrest. He did not take part in the search for his wife.
The prosecution is providing us with discovery on the event, on the tampering with evidence. We told the judge that everything is just going well in that regard.
The investigation continued as detectives interviewed relatives and friends to better understand the state of the couple's marriage. It became clear that serious problems had existed between them for a long time. Andre managed the day-to-day operations of a rapidly expanding business that had grown to 3 assisted living facilities, with plans to open a 4th. Its value was estimated at around $1 billion. But tension within the marriage kept building. In 2016, after attending training in Alabama, Andre returned home and discovered that Andreen had sent him a message telling him not to come back. Shortly after, he learned she had gotten 2 new tattoos. One was an infinity symbol with the letter A inside it, and the other was a date. To Andre, the meaning was obvious. The A was not for him or for her. He believed it referred to Andreen's former boyfriend, Aubin, whom he described as a local gang member and drug dealer they had known back in Jamaica. Aubin reportedly had a matching tattoo on his chest, and the date on Andreen's arm corresponded to his birthday. Andre eventually filed for divorce under Texas community property laws, where assets are divided equally. The process was already moving forward, but in 2017, Andreen convinced him to stop the divorce. The marriage never fully recovered, but the tension eased somewhat, and they continued raising their daughter together while running the business. However, by early 2019, old conflicts resurfaced again. Andreen had returned from a trip to Jamaica, where investigators believe she had continued a relationship with Aubin, and disputes between the couple intensified over her intentions to move back to Jamaica. On July 11th, 2019, 5 months after Andreen disappeared, a farmer named Clifton Clend was working his property near Speck Road. While going to retrieve a cow's head that had been used as a decoration, he noticed a strong foul odor. As he got closer, he discovered human remains among the bones and immediately called the sheriff's office. This happened at approximately 7:30 in the evening. The farm was located less than 10 miles from the McDonald residence.
This is actually quite literally ground zero for the search for Andreen McDonald. Our mounted patrol was up and down this road searching. These remains that were found this time, of course, it's too early to tell whether they're those of a male or a female.
The sheriff described the location as extremely remote. It was a deserted road area. The remains were discovered about 20 yards deep into the property, past the fence and gated entrance. Search teams had already scanned nearby fields, but they were not able to access the actual site because it was private property. The remains were covered with wood and the bones of a dead cow, and the pile had also been set on fire. The Bexar County Sheriff's Office made the announcement many had been waiting for. They had found Andreen McDonald. With the recovery of Andreen's body, investigators finally obtained the last missing piece of the case they had been building against Andre McDonald. He was arrested near his own home and charged with first-degree murder. The case faced several delays, including disruptions caused by the COVID pandemic, which pushed the start of the trial to early 2023. Throughout all of this time, Andre remained silent and did not provide any statements from the earliest days of his wife's disappearance. That's why it came as a surprise when, just 3 days before the trial began, Andre called his former mother-in-law and confessed to killing his wife. He said he wanted to be honest with the family. According to him, Andreen allegedly attacked him during an argument, and he claimed he was forced to defend himself. During the struggle, she fell, and he said that 2 kicks while she was on the floor, meant to restrain her, supposedly resulted in her being strangled. He insisted he never intended to kill her. Andre said he wanted Morin to hear his version of events before he testified in court, and his defense at trial was expected to be based on self-defense. The trial began with testimony from Morin, who described receiving a phone call from Andre a few days earlier. She recounted what he told her about that night, that they had argued, Andreen had fallen to the floor, and he had stepped on her.
What did Andre say about that?
Alina was coming downstairs, so he take Alina back upstairs and put her to bed.
Did he explain what was happening or what Andreen was doing as he was taking the one upstairs?
She was on the floor wheezing.
Did Andre state what happened after he put Elena upstairs?
When he came back down, she was dead.
Dr. James, a forensic pathologist with the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office, performed the autopsy. He confirmed that Andreen's death was a violent one, specifically caused by blunt force trauma. When asked whether asphyxiation could be ruled out, he said it could not be excluded, explaining that the condition of the remains was too limited to determine every detail with certainty.
How did Andre McDonald pass away?
In order to answer that, I would have to tell the jury that there is uncertainty related to this case because of the fact that we are only looking at bones.
When asked by the prosecution whether the injuries found could be consistent with blows from a claw hammer, he answered yes. During the investigation, several injuries were documented, including spinal fractures, signs of charring on the bones of the fingers, and a broken jaw, which, according to the expert, could not be explained by a single kick alone, as Andre had claimed. It was also determined that Andreen's remains had been intentionally destroyed with portions of the bones burned, and this point was not disputed. The hammer found in the house could have been either the murder weapon or an object used after the fact. The internet search history from Andre's phone provided insight into his concerns about potential evidence, and those records were presented in court.
At the bottom, can you tell us what the search was on 138?
Can someone fall and break their neck? Fingerprints. How long do fingerprints last? Bring DNA outdoors. How long does blood last for testing? How long does DNA last for testing? Best surfaces for fingerprints. Fingerprints on bones. How long do bones take to become dry and brittle? Is Austin humid? Is Texas humid? DNA decay in humid weather. How long do... it's a www.quora.com. Why does breaking someone's neck kill them?
When it was the defense's turn, Andre took the stand and testified.
Defense calls Major Andre McDonald.
The defense largely hinged on whether his version of events could be believed. At first, Andre described how he allegedly discovered his wife's infidelity. He then went on to claim that, in his view, Andre was planning to transfer the entire business and all assets into her own name. From his perspective, the company was a joint 50-50 venture that he had helped finance from the very beginning. In the event of a divorce, the assets were supposed to be split equally, but according to Andre, that still was not enough for Andreen, and he stated,
"So there is absolutely no way you can legally have business and assets with a spouse and then get a divorce and not have half go to one spouse and half go to the other one. So in my opinion, the only way she was going to get everything to go share with a boyfriend, they had to have been planning get me whacked when I went to Jamaica." And
That's what you were thinking.
yes, that's what I was thinking.
The prosecution presented the same set of facts in a completely different light. They argued that Andre viewed both the business and Andreen herself as something he owned. Since he had financed the startup phase of the company, he believed it belonged to him more than to her. He had also sponsored her immigration to the United States and paid for her university education, which, according to the prosecution, reinforced a sense of control and ownership over her. From that perspective, the state argued, his affair and Andreen's alleged plan to take over the business and assets pushed him into a state of rage, and that was what ultimately led him to kill her. The couple had also gone together to the H&R Block tax office to discuss new business plans, and during that meeting, Andre learned that Andreen had created a new company using their shared assets. It was called Elena Property Management, and it was registered solely in her name.
When I did the edits for the business plan and submitted them to Andreen to give them to the bank, they were under Starlight Homes. But here on this form, it says there's a business plan going forward under Elena Property Management, which I knew nothing about, and immediately I just knew she was stealing from me.
They began to argue at the tax office. The exchange continued on the way home.
Her response was, she's always alone. That's why, she'll set things up where she does it by herself. And that's when I said, that doesn't make any sense because we both live in the same house. How can you be doing stuff alone? When are you ever alone? We live in the same house. We sleep in the same house every night. So I'm not sure. That doesn't make any sense. You're clearly trying to steal from me.
At the tax office, an argument broke out between them almost immediately, and it quickly turned tense and personal. According to the case materials, the conflict didn't stay as a brief exchange of words and instead escalated rapidly while they were still inside the building. The atmosphere was unstable, and every statement only added more tension between them. The confrontation then continued on the drive home, where both of their emotional states remained heightened. In the court's description, this period was treated as a continuous escalation that began inside the office, never really stopped after they left, and simply carried over into a different location.
Response was, she's always alone. That's why, she'll set things up where she does it by herself. And that's when I said, that doesn't make any sense because we both live in the same house. How can you be doing stuff alone? When are you ever alone? We live in the same house. We sleep in the same house every night. So I'm not sure. That doesn't make any sense. You're clearly trying to steal from me.
After returning home, the argument between them escalated even further, becoming highly emotional and unstable. According to Andre's version of events, he decided to leave the house in an attempt to calm things down and put some distance between himself and the ongoing conflict. At that point, he got into his car and drove to a Shell gas station where he claimed he stayed for a while, continuing the argument through text messages they were still exchanging even while apart. After that, he went to a local park where he remained alone, listening to music and, as he said, trying to calm himself and regain emotional balance. However, in the court's interpretation, this period was treated as important for establishing his movements and state of mind at the time. According to him, he returned home around midnight, assuming that Andreen was already asleep and that the conflict had ended. But instead, he found her still awake, waiting for him, and in a highly agitated state, which marked the beginning of another stage of escalation in their confrontation.
She's right there. So I told her, look, tomorrow when I leave work, I'm going to go back downtown to the divorce lawyer and I'm going to get a divorce. This time, I'm not pulling it up. Which basically means I'm not stopping the divorce like I did the first time.
After those words, according to his version of events, she allegedly reacted abruptly, exploding with anger and beginning to insult him. In court, this description was presented as his attempt to explain the emotional dynamics of a conflict that, in his account, escalated very quickly. The defense framed it as a confrontation that spiraled out of control. He further claimed that the argument gradually moved from the living room into the bedroom, where the tension between them, according to him, only intensified. During this confrontation, she allegedly sustained a scratch on her face. This detail was examined separately in court since every physical sign of injury was treated as a potentially important element in reconstructing the exact sequence of events and assessing the credibility of his explanation.
At that point, she gets extremely angry, and that's when she comes, across the bathroom from the switch back towards the door where I was standing there to attack me.
When she attacks you, do you react?
Yeah, so when she comes, she's throwing some punches, so I'm trying to duck down and keep my face from, getting hit with the blows. And then in between the scuffle, I remember grabbing her and tripping her over one of my legs. And then she falls, and that's when I kicked her twice when she fell. So when she got the second kick, I think I heard some type of wheezing, coming out of her. And then also, in the background, I could hear some footsteps running. And at that point, I was like, oh shit, Elena.
According to him, after the second strike, he heard her gasping for air, which he described as a sudden and frightening sound that momentarily changed the course of events. In court, this detail was treated as part of his version of what happened in the final seconds of the incident and was closely examined during cross-examination. At the same time, he claimed that in that moment he also heard the footsteps of a child inside the house, which, according to him, added further pressure to the situation and influenced his subsequent actions. This element of his testimony was discussed separately in the courtroom as the prosecution considered it an important detail in reconstructing the timeline of events and evaluating his explanation of why things unfolded the way they did. I realized it was just 2 strikes. Later, Andre admitted that he transported Andreen to a rural area and left her in a field near the bones of a dead cow. In court, this detail was emphasized as a significant part of the route he took and the choice of location, since it was remote and sparsely populated, which would have made the body difficult to discover quickly. During questioning, this episode was also examined as part of his explanation of what allegedly happened after the main events of that night. However, the circumstances of leaving the body in an open rural area became one of the key factors the prosecution closely analyzed as they built the overall narrative of the case.
When you put the body there, what did you do?
So at that time, I took the bags off. I was just going to leave it there. And for some reason, I don't remember why, but I just had this weird idea to probably should just take the clothes. So I took the clothes and threw them in the bag and then went back in the car and went home.
Andre did not stop attempting to cover up the events, and his later actions only reinforced this pattern of behavior, which was carefully examined in court. Early on the morning of March 2nd, after being released from custody, he once again drove in the direction of the area where he had previously left Andreen. This move was treated as a continuation of his actions after the main incident, at a time when the situation was already under close scrutiny by investigators. The case materials emphasized that this return trip was significant not only as a matter of movement, but also as part of the overall timeline of his behavior during the critical hours following the events. Taken together with his other actions, this episode helped form a sequence that the prosecution sought to present to the jury as deliberate and systematic rather than accidental.
Why would she need to go through all this stuff to try to get it all? And then in my opinion, at that point, I'm thinking that's what the whole thing about going to Jamaica was, trying to get this dude to probably offer me off so she can get everything. So I get really angry. So at that point, I poured the gas on him and then I lit the fire.
He used the fuel he had brought with him to start a fire, but the flames quickly lost intensity and burned out much faster than he had expected. In court, this was described as one of the moments that illustrated the instability of the situation and the unpredictability of his actions at the time. He later stated that he needed to obtain more fuel in order to continue what he was doing and achieve the intended result. After that, he picked up a hammer and began striking, which became another episode the prosecution viewed as part of a continuous sequence of events. Each of these steps was analyzed separately in court, as together they formed a broader picture of his behavior during the critical moment.
So at that point, I got a hammer and, the body's right there. So at that point, I just got really pissed off and started hitting the body with the hammer.
The garage door was damaged by the Porsche while it was being driven out of the garage on the afternoon of March 2nd, which became another episode in the chain of events later examined in detail during the trial. According to the prosecution, at that point, his behavior already suggested a loss of rational control, or at least a significant level of emotional distress influencing his decisions. Instead of continuing in the Porsche, he got into his Jaguar and drove to a gun store, which was also treated as an important time and behavior marker in reconstructing the sequence of events. There, he purchased a Smith & Wesson handgun, but as it was later established, he ultimately left the store without taking the weapon with him, leaving it behind inside. This fact became the subject of separate discussion in court, as the prosecution and the defense interpreted its significance very differently within the overall narrative of the case.
Man, at this point, honestly, man, I'm just really, really angry because.
Did you have any sleep?
Nah, I didn't sleep at that point. I'm tired, but I'm angry. I'm tired, at that point, and I'm just going off fumes at that point because, like I said, I just kept repeating in my head how the hell does this shit, happen to me and me of all people? Why the hell did this have to happen to me?
During cross-examination, Andre was directly questioned about the messages he sent to Andreen after 1 a.m. that same night. By that point, as established in court, he had already killed her and left her body in a field, which made those messages particularly controversial and crucial in assessing his version of events. After returning from the farm on Speck Road, he texted his wife, and the content of those messages became one of the central points of questioning. In the courtroom, these texts were treated not as ordinary communication, but as potential evidence of his state of mind and his awareness of what had already occurred during a time when, according to the prosecution, the events had already concluded. Where are you? Elena is in her room, and you're not here.
And I'm thinking about like the situation now, like literally in the morning, she's supposed to go to work. At some point, somebody's going to want to know. And it's at that point, like I'm thinking, I'm panicking, but at the same time, I'm thinking about the whole situation. You know, the mom is dead. I'm probably going to get blamed. My 7-year-old daughter doesn't have both parents. And it's at that point, like I said, I start thinking about, okay, I'll just get her out of the house and then I'll just pretend I don't know where she is.
He claimed that he did not use all of the items purchased at Lowe's home improvement store because he supposedly changed his mind during the process and experienced a kind of moral crisis. According to his version, it was this internal turning point that stopped him from carrying out any further actions with the prepared items. He presented it as a sudden moment of realization that allegedly altered his intentions. However, the prosecution took a completely opposite and much harsher view of those explanations. They emphasized that this version did not align with the established facts, arguing that he had already set the scene on fire and used a hammer despite the alleged emotional state of anger or impulsivity. In the prosecutor's view, these actions showed planning and control rather than a sudden abandonment of intent, as the defense tried to suggest.
So you wanted to go and desecrate the corpse with a hammer?
I don't know if you can desecrate a corpse with a hammer, sir, but you can hit it a few times really hard.
The prosecution also argued that his prolonged silence and lack of any active effort during the 5 months of the search were not accidental, but instead appeared to be a deliberate attempt to conceal evidence and divert attention away from himself. They emphasized that this behavior did not match that of someone supposedly in shock or despair, but rather suggested a controlled and consistent pattern of actions after the disappearance. In response to this, Andre directly stated,
"That doesn't make any sense. Why would I make any efforts if I already know she's dead? Like, I'm not going to go out in the field and pretend and do some charade or something, like pretending going out doing fake searches with people and passing out files. Why would I do any of that? That's just cruel on top of what already happened."
You were hopeful that she wouldn't be found, correct?
I sort of expected that she would be found. I was just surprised it took that long. But watching the way, the grass grew over time, that's when I could see that. But when I put her there on March 1st, I'm thinking, that area did not look anything like that. And it certainly did not look like something that would last like several months. I'm thinking she's probably going to get found in a day or two, to be honest.
In closing arguments, the prosecution highlighted several of the most contradictory and questionable elements in Andre's version of events. A significant part of their case focused on the differences in physical strength and size between him and his wife, emphasizing that this disparity gave him a clear physical advantage. Jurors were repeatedly reminded that, despite this, the defense claimed he was somehow able to overpower her without significant effort, which they argued made that interpretation of events difficult to accept logically. The prosecution also stressed that Andre's explanation of 2 kicks delivered in an alleged self-defense scenario supposedly resulting in her death by accident was internally inconsistent and did not align with the overall circumstances of the case. They argued that this version of events did not hold up under scrutiny when considering the sequence of actions and the outcomes established during the investigation and trial.
You heard what his side of the story was. He's afraid of this superwoman that's so much bigger and stronger at him. Yet in the 2 interactions they have, he headbutts her and opens her up. And then the second one, she's running at him and he does some type of judo move, gets her on the ground, does 2 kicks he doesn't know where, and suddenly she's dead. It's not reasonable. And his story is not reasonable. And that's why self-defense doesn't apply, because it's a murder case.
The jury deliberated for 5 hours on the first day, carefully going through all the evidence presented in court. They submitted multiple questions to the judge, seeking clarification on specific legal points, and revisited Andre's testimony, paying close attention to even the smallest inconsistencies and details in his statements. As discussions progressed, the atmosphere became increasingly tense, and at one point they formally reported that they were at an impasse and unable to reach a unanimous decision. In response, Judge Frank Castro instructed the jurors to return to deliberations under what is known as an Allen charge, a specific legal instruction used in court practice to encourage jurors to re-examine their positions and attempt to reach unanimity without producing a rushed or incomplete verdict. This instruction is typically given when there is a risk of a hung jury and is intended to promote further discussion without pressuring any particular side. Following this, the jurors resumed deliberations, and the process continued for many more hours. Only after approximately 14 hours of total discussion did they reach a final, unanimous decision, bringing this stage of the trial to a close.
To the count of murder charged in the indictment, the jury finds the defendant not guilty of the offense of murder, as charged in the indictment, and guilty of the offense of manslaughter.
This was not the verdict the prosecution, the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, and Andreen's family had been hoping for, as throughout the entire process they had expected a more definitive outcome given the evidence presented and the overall course of the hearings.
Absolutely, I'm disappointed in that. However, if the family is able to find peace and closure, then I'm happy. I'm happy with that outcome for them.
During sentencing, Judge Castro noted that he saw no sign of remorse or genuine sympathy from Andre regarding what had happened. In his remarks, the judge specifically emphasized that the defendant remained emotionally detached throughout the entire process, as if the situation did not directly concern him. He also drew attention to Andre's behavior in the courtroom, particularly the fact that he often looked at his phone during testimony instead of paying attention to the witnesses and their statements. This detail was seen as especially telling and raised additional concern for the court about his attitude toward the proceedings. Even more troubling, the judge pointed out that any emotional reaction from Andre only appeared when the victim's bones were shown in court. According to the court, those were the only moments when his behavior noticeably changed, which further highlighted the coldness and detachment observed throughout the hearings.
It disturbed me that the only time he seemed to pay attention was when they showed her bones up there. We were looking like very interested in it again, and not in sadness of some sort. It disturbed me. It didn't make sense with your background and no criminal history yet. With the victim's body with cow bones, it's also sickening to leave her there with cow bones. Again, to cover your actions, but to do that with the animal cow bones. In addition, not to top it off, is weighing this against your mitigating stuff, is that you burned her body, you beat it with a hammer and desecrated her corpse. Like after that, it almost seems like an emotional, like a serial killer or something. It doesn't match up with your military career and everything else that you got here. It just, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and sentence you to 20 years in the institutional division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice.
20 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice was the maximum sentence allowed under the terms of the conviction. The court specifically emphasized that this was the highest possible penalty under the relevant statute, with no further increase available for that charge. In addition, Andre had entered a plea agreement on the charge of tampering with evidence, which added another 5 years of imprisonment to be served consecutively, meaning one sentence would begin only after the other had been completed. In total, this significantly extended the overall length of incarceration, effectively ensuring a long-term prison term with no immediate possibility of reducing the primary sentence. Custody of Elena was officially granted to her grandmother, Maureen Smith. This decision was made during the trial after consideration of the case circumstances and the child's family situation. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence when the ruling was announced, as it ultimately determined where the child would live moving forward. During the hearing, a letter from Elena was also read aloud, in which she stated, "You killed my mom. You will pay for it forever." In Jamaica, Andre's father, Everton McDonald, also became involved in serious legal trouble, drawing significant attention from both law enforcement and the local community. His trial was scheduled for September 2023 on allegations that he had allegedly hired a hitman to kill his wife, Ha Hamilton McDonald, in July 2020. He was also separately charged with an additional and equally serious accusation of murdering his first wife, Marlene McDonald, back in 2009. Both cases were treated as extremely serious, involving long investigations and complex evidentiary records. According to the available schedule, the trial was expected to begin in January 2024 if no plea agreement was reached. Importantly, both incidents allegedly took place in Port Antonio, which also became a key detail in the case files within Jamaica. Only 4 months after sentencing, Andre formally filed an appeal against his conviction for manslaughter, seeking to have the higher court review the original decision. In his appeal, he argued that the trial court had allegedly misclassified his foot as a deadly weapon, which became one of the central points of contention in the case. The defense also pointed to other possible procedural issues and questioned certain pieces of evidence presented during the trial. At that stage, the appeal process was expected to be lengthy, with no clearly defined timeline for completion, as the case required a detailed review of all materials and legal arguments.